Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on September 6, 2019, and is current through the end of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 30-minute news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 5 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone, and I'm thrilled this week that my guest is none other than Star Trek novelist and editor Scott Pearson. Scott, welcome to WeeklyTrek.
Happy to be here.
Scott, you are my first guest who has officially licensed public Star Trek material to his name. So tell me a little bit about your involvement with the franchise.
Well, it's gotten bigger and bigger as the years have gone on, but I got my start in the old Strange New Worlds writing contest.
Yes.
Had a couple of short stories in those, and from there I got invited to pitch to The Sky's the Limit, which was the Star Trek Next Generation 20th Anniversary Anthology. So I had a story in there, and then I did a Myriad Universes short novel or novella, depending on your word count definition, called Honor in the Night. That was a alternate timeline sequel to The Trouble with Tribbles. And then the last writing I did for Star Trek was an ebook novella called The More Things Change. That was a Spock and Chapel story. And about the time that came out, I started doing freelance copy editing for the Star Trek line. And so now for the last, I think it's 5 years now, I've copy edited essentially all the fiction from Simon & Schuster.
So if anybody has complaints about typos in any of the Star Trek novels, you're the guy to talk to, right?
Unfortunately, I would have to take my share of the blame, yes.
Well, I have to say, I mean, you know, there are some books, like I remember reading The Godfather, and it is just riddled with typos and little errors. But the Star Trek novels, it seems like, and especially since there's so much like, you know, canon and continuity and little details and names that will layer on top of each other, it must actually be, you know, kind of demanding work to keep all that together.
It is. It can be a crazy amount of time that I'll spend looking up watching a scene from an episode, or, you know, digging out all my reference books to just make sure that the things are all lined up. And it is hard to keep it all straight after all these years, because it's not like the shows themselves had the best continuity. When you're cranking out a weekly show, there's going to be things that get sort of retconned along the way. So sometimes the authors have their choice of a line of continuity, or some authors, a lot of the things that the authors love to do is to find a way to make it all work somehow. You know, Christopher Bennett is one that's particularly great at finding little inconsistencies and finding a way to smooth it out, to give that illusion of this perfect self-contained universe that we all love so much.
Well, and I just did an interview with John Jackson Miller about the Enterprise War that was published on TrekCore.com this week, and he was talking to me about how you and he had worked together on figuring out a particular sequence in the novel that I won't spoil on the air for those who haven't read it yet. That was something new for the Constitution-class starship.
I sometimes frighten myself and perhaps the authors as well with incredibly obsessive comments and queries about stuff in the novels.
Well, I mean, it's only to the benefit, right? Because, I mean, ultimately, you know, the more these things work together, and frankly, the more opportunities for, you know, pointing out inconsistencies are reduced, the more I think it heightens folks' enjoyment, especially the, you know, extreme hardcore fans, of which I probably should count myself as one of them.
Yep, as long as you can do it. You know, you never want to really get in the way of a great story, even if it has to fudge some of the little details a little bit. But we bend continuity as much as possible. We try not to break it. I just want to say that one of the fun things that I'm doing besides copy editing Star Trek novels is that I've been working on the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game for the last 3 years. Primarily, I've been doing canon review. I just read the materials and make sure, you know, nothing conflicts with the TV shows and movies. But I am now going to be doing some writing for some upcoming supplements. I'm not at liberty to say what those supplements are yet, but I'm going to be writing Star Trek again. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh, that's awesome. I just did an interview that also will be appearing on Trek Core with Jim Johnson about Star Trek Adventures. I guess it's now been 2 years since the first book was released.
Yep.
And I mean, those books are, even if you're not a player, those books are stunningly gorgeous in terms of the artwork they have and the kind of deep dives they do into the franchise's canon. So super exciting that you're involved in helping them write those.
Yeah, it is amazing the amount of stuff that they fit in there. And in fact, I was just with Jim Johnson. I went out to lunch with Jim a couple of days ago, and he brought me copies of the books that I've worked on that I didn't have yet. And so I've just been once again marveling at the art and design of those books. It's so well done. All
right, Scott, I ask my guests this question every week. I want to know something that's got you feeling good about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Well, I just got today the Star Trek Official Guide to the Animated Series, the new book that just came out. Have you seen this book yet?
Yes, and actually that is also my pick for this week as well. So go ahead. Tell me why the animated series guide has got you feeling good about Star Trek.
Oh, well, I'm of an age that I was watching the animated series when it was first broadcast in the early 70s. And that's when the hook set deep on me with Star Trek. I was, in first or second grade, and I was watching the original series in syndication and watching the animated series on Saturday mornings. And so the original series and the animated series are just woven together for me. And it's also the way I introduced my daughter to Star Trek when she got to be 5 or 6, and she was kind of noticing that I was always talking about this thing called Star Trek. She started asking about it. I dug out my old VHS tapes of the animated series, played them for her, and she just immediately fell in love with Star Trek. So I've always been a big fan of the animated series, and it was kind of out in the cold for a long time, not really considered part of continuity. It wasn't really emphasized that much in the history, but more and more it's gotten a lot of recognition and a lot of love from fans. And once it came out on DVD, and so that new people could actually see it for the first time, I love to see that it's got this continuing interest. And it's a great book. It's got behind the scenes trivia. It's got sketches. It really shows you how the animated series was made, the kind of lovable low end animation that had a charm of its own. It's quite a good book.
Yeah, for me, this book has been my gateway to actually finding an appreciation for the animated series. I have to admit, I came to it from the other side, where I did buy the DVDs when they first came out. I guess probably, what was that, like 2004, 2005, something like that. And the show did not click with me. I had real trouble with it. I struggled with the animation. I struggled with the storytelling. There were some episodes that I enjoyed, but for the most part, I had real trouble with it. And then I had the opportunity to interview Aaron and Rich, the writers of the book, in advance of the release. Again, for those listening, if you're interested, the interview's up at trekcore.com. And the way they were talking about it, the passion they had for the show, has made me kind of revisit it and look at it in a new eye. And I think, recognizing all of the limitations of the animation style, that, this was not necessarily a perfect medium in which to tell a Star Trek story, but it was the medium in which they had access to, and they took full advantage of it. There's actually a lot to like about the show, and there's a lot of charm in it, and a lot to enjoy. And so I've just kind of started sort of digging into the book itself, but it's definitely made me feel much more appreciative of the animated series, and certainly of its place in the legacy of the franchise, right? Where, it is a really important stepping stone to the motion picture and to all of the movies that came after and all of the TV shows that came after that, and this current kind of resurgence of the franchise that we have at the moment. And I'm glad that, as a piece of history and as an important piece of history to the franchise, it is getting the appreciation that it deserves.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
So we've been off for the last couple of weeks because it's been a very quiet week after the big rush of San Diego Comic-Con and Star Trek Las Vegas and all of the announcements that there were around both of those conventions. Seems like the folks at CBS and Paramount took a bit of a well-earned break after the announcement of the merger between CBS and Viacom. So there really hasn't been that much Star Trek news over the past couple of weeks. But this week, that all changed, and we are back to having lots of news to talk about and lots of exciting things to discuss. So our first story this week is that Star Trek Picard Season 1 has finished filming principal photography for the season. They are done shooting all 10 episodes of the first season. Michael Chabon, the showrunner, announced that filming had concluded, and there were also a number of posts on social media from various members of the crew, all of which was spoiler-free. There was a particular tease from one of the visual effects supervisors who posted a video of him taking pictures of something for part of a visual effects work, but the video doesn't kind of pan left just far enough for you to be able to see what it is he's taking a picture of, and it's blue screen behind. So lots of teasers, lots of pictures of very fabulous crew gifts that were handed out at the end of filming. There's a lovely cap with the sort of split delta that we saw in in one of the shots in the trailer of Picard at Starfleet Command. So we know that filming in Southern California has finished, and now we move into post-production. So we're expecting months of visual effects work, editing, sound, music, etc. There's been no kind of further clarity on when Star Trek Picard Season 1 will be premiering. All we just really know at this point is that it's early 2020. But Scott, this is, really exciting. We have 10 episodes with Sir Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard that we haven't seen yet, that are now in the can and getting ready for us to see them. Are you as excited for Star Trek Picard as I am?
Yes. I'm very excited about it. Looking forward to seeing where these characters are after all these years. It's going to be interesting as well from the point of view of a person who's involved with the fiction, because we've had, through the novels, we've had one imagining of what the future of the crew could have been like after the end of the movies. And now we're going to get a different take on it. And I'm also very excited because my friend Kirsten Beyer was one of the co-creators on the show. So I'm always very excited to see what she's doing in the Star Trek universe. And obviously, Patrick Stewart is a fabulous actor no matter what he's doing. And to see him return to this iconic role, and along with the various, and we don't even know yet how many cameos or, other people from other series are going to be woven in. We know some of them, and all of that just makes it that much more exciting.
But I think it is going to be really cool to see, to the point that you're also making, where these characters are. We know, and that actually ties into our second story of the week, which is in relation to Jonathan Frakes talking about his anxiety over returning to acting in front of the camera for Star Trek Picard. So Frakes was appearing at Fan Expo Canada last weekend, did a panel. And obviously, at Star Trek Las Vegas, he showed up wearing a T-shirt that said, "Don't ask me, I signed an NDA." So he's gotten very tight-lipped after kind of letting slip the Mirror Universe arc for Star Trek Discovery Season 1 about making sure that he's not giving away spoilers. But he did talk a little bit about returning to acting.
I hadn't acted in a long time. I hadn't played Riker for 18 years, and I've been very fortunate to be busy directing. I acted briefly in a movie in Winnipeg about 10 years ago, and I had a major anxiety attack because, for whatever reason, and I forgot how to act, I forgot my lines, and it was not a pretty picture for a few hours. I got my shit together and ended up doing fine, but I knew, I had just directed 2 episodes of Picard with Sir Patrick, and as I said, his acting muscle was well-toned. And Marina had just closed, having started a play on the West End in London. So I knew she was going to be in good form. So I was a nervous wreck. It ended up going very well. But don't let anybody tell you it's like getting back on a bike. That's bullshit. That's acting bullshit.
I can't imagine if I had to do something I hadn't done for 10 years, if I had to do something I hadn't done for 18 years, quite how difficult that would be. But super, super exciting that we're going to get Jonathan Frakes back as Riker. Scott, are you looking forward to Frakes back as Riker? Is there anything that you've ever had to do in which, you found yourself in a similar situation?
No. And in fact, I was really interested by that article because it didn't even occur to me because even though he hasn't been acting recently, you just think of the amount of time he's spent in that character over 7 seasons of the show, 20 plus episodes a season, and then to do the movies. You think like, oh, that'll just like be putting on a nice comfortable old pair of shoes or something that would come right back to. So to see how genuinely nervous he was to try to find that character again and reconnect with it. Yeah, that was amazing. And then I saw that Jerry Ryan said very similar things about coming back to a character. It took me by surprise. But when you think about your own life, like you said, if you think about going back to do something you haven't done for that long, that could be intimidating.
Yeah, it's also funny because you see these guys at convention. I mean, Frakes especially, but Jerry Ryan too. I mean, they're always super confident, gregarious, very entertaining. And it's kind of tough to sort of visualize that these guys would sort of feel nervous about, returning to do something like this when they seem like such sort of supremely confident people. But it's very humanizing in some ways to kind of hear that they also go through the same sort of struggles in figuring out their own kind of work life and doing this kind of stuff. And they're not necessarily just the superheroes that we set them up to be.
Well, and it just underscores that it's acting. And so no matter what they're feeling inside, they have to put on an exterior. And I think that when they do public appearances, to a certain extent, that's acting as well, that you have to go out there and you have to be you're in a certain persona when you're dealing with your fans. And so, it's easy to forget that they're just real people.
There was a little bit of news about Frakes as well, which is that just switching from Picard to Discovery really quickly, that Frakes will be back to direct episode 8 of season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. So we know, because he's talked about this in the past, he directed 2 episodes. He directed 1 episode in season 1 of Discovery, 2 episodes in season 2. And he's talked before about how he was scheduled to direct 2 episodes of season 3. Looks like he directed the 2nd episode of the season, which is the same episode that he filmed last season. And then he actually had to cancel his appearance at Destination Star Trek in London. And the reason given was because he would be directing episode 8 of Star Trek Discovery. I mean, regardless of how good he is going to be at acting after 10 years of not doing it, though he's Jonathan Frakes, he's a rock star, I'm sure he will be amazing at it. He really has kind of cut his teeth at being a really excellent Star Trek director. Scott, are you looking forward to seeing 2 more Frakes episodes in Discovery in addition to the 2 Jonathan Frakes directed episodes we're getting for the first season of Picard?
Oh, yes. Obviously because he lived Star Trek, he has a special feeling for it. And I also think, just in general, often when an actor or former actor directs, you often hear lots of good things said about it from the actor's point of view, that they're easier to work with, that they know what you're going through. And so when you couple that with his Star Trek history and knowing, how you have to work with the actors that are dealing with a bunch of Star Trek technobabble and that sort of thing, I think it's just great to have him on board and really helps the show. Any of the shows that he works on.
Yeah, and it seems like the casts have a real love and appreciation for the work that he does. And I guess, it's to his benefit that he also worked as an actor, because he sort of understands their needs as well as the needs on the production side as well. And he's directed some fabulous episodes. I mean, I think New Eden's probably my favorite Star Trek Discovery episode to date. And, a big part of that is from the direction of the episode. I thought it was just really, really well done.
And there's that great shot, I forget the name of the episode, where it's when Tilly is when she's seeing May. There's a shot, I think it's in that episode, where she runs out of the room and goes one way, and then there's a little bit of a beat, and then she comes back running the opposite direction.
Yes.
And it's such a nice little shot, and I saw something online that was Frakes' idea to do that little bit. And it was just such a nice little, it brings a little bit of a lighter tone in an episode that was pretty heavy, and it's also just so fitting for that Tilly character. And it's those little things like that can add so much to a show.
Yeah, that was a really nice moment. And I also remember reading an interview in which he talked about how that was not a scripted moment, that was something that they came up with while they were filming. And it was a really effective moment, and one that stands out in even an otherwise excellent episode. So when will we next learn a big tranche of new information about Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard? Well, it turns out we don't have too long to wait. New York Comic Con is surprisingly, right around the corner. It's only a month away. And CBS have announced big plans for Star Trek at New York Comic-Con. At San Diego Comic-Con, we got a 90-minute panel on the high day of the convention, and it looks like we're going to get exactly the same at New York Comic-Con. So on Saturday, October the 5th, between 1 and 2:30 p.m. at the Hulu Theater in Madison Square Garden, there will be a 90-minute Star Trek panel that will cover both Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard. The shows will get about 45 minutes each. First Discovery, then Picard. And it's a pretty stellar lineup for both of the casts appearing. So for Discovery, appearing will be Sonequa Martin-Green, Doug Jones, Mary Wiseman, Anthony Rapp, Wilson Cruz, newcomer series regular David Ayala, and Alex Kurtzman. And then for Star Trek Picard, Patrick Stewart will be in attendance, Alison Pill, Isa Briones, Michelle Hurd, Santiago Cabrera, Harry Treadaway, and Evan Ivagora. And also Alex Kurtzman will be on that panel as well. Out of San Diego Comic-Con, we didn't get much from Star Trek Discovery because they had literally just started filming the week before when San Diego Comic-Con happened. They've now filmed at least 3, maybe 4 episodes of the season up to this point. So they might even be through 5 episodes of the season by New York Comic-Con. I think it would not be outside the realm of possibility that we would see our first trailer for Star Trek Discovery Season 3 at New York Comic-Con. And then at San Diego Comic-Con, we got our very first full-length trailer for Star Trek Picard. And I think it's also likely that we will get a bit more on Picard. You know, they have an hour and a half to fill, so they're certainly going to be bringing something. And if I were a betting man, I would put my money on the release date for Star Trek Picard being announced at New York Comic-Con. That seems like a good kind of next sort of thing to drop for people. But Scott, I mean, what do you think we're going to learn from this next big panel?
It'll be interesting. You know, they've been so tight-lipped about Picard, and so I really do think they're going to drop some big bombs at Comic-Con. Although I was kind of surprised, even some of the big bombs they dropped at the last one. You know, when we saw that long trailer and we saw Seven and we saw Data in the preview, it was like, that was huge. I mean, those are such huge things. I almost would have expected them to hold those secret for longer. So, boy, I mean, who knows? There could be. How can it go bigger than that? Do they have more secrets that are bigger than that to drop? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think I've talked about this before, but when I watched obviously I was not at San Diego Comic-Con, but they did put a video of the panel up about a week later for you to watch. And to the point you were making about them being so tight-lipped about Star Trek Picard, what was really interesting was all of the news that came out of the Picard panel came out of the trailer.
Yeah.
With one exception, which was the announcement that Frakes and Marina Sirtis would be returning to play Riker and Troy. Everything else was packed into that 1.5 minutes. In the other 45 minutes of the panel, it actually didn't really say all that much that we did not already know. You know, Patrick Stewart talked about how happy he was to be back playing the character, what it was like playing the character again. He's talked about that in interviews up to this point already. Some of the new cast members talked a little bit about what, you know, their characters were, but they clearly felt very, you know, unsure about what they could say and being, you know, quite careful. So, you know, maybe at New York Comic-Con, they will announce, you know, perhaps one more cameo appearance from an established character in the Star Trek universe, you know, maybe one of the other TNG crew. But yeah, that I think, you know, in terms of what we're going to get for Star Trek Picard, that's the one I'm most interested in. Discovery, it seems like pretty much a no-brainer. We'll probably get, you know, a first trailer, and from that, they'll start to kind of tease out some of the details of what Star Trek Discovery Season 3 will be. But, you know, they've been so tight-lipped on Picard, they gave us some really big reveals at San Diego Comic-Con. I'll be super, super interested in what they have for New York Comic-Con. Ideally a release date, you know, but hopefully a bit more than that. I mean, you know, I'd love to see a second trailer, but it seems like overkill to release 3 trailers within a space of what pretty much is like 4 months from the first one through today, that first trailer that we got in the Vineyard. So yeah, it's going to be a really fascinating one. Of course, I'll be, you know, glued to Twitter seeing what's going to get posted. But I mean, they've done some pretty big stuff at New York Comic Con last year. They had a trailer for season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. I don't know if it was. I think it was the second trailer. They'd done a short one at San Diego Comic Con. So they clearly rate it, just as high as San Diego Comic Con as a place to release this. The other thing too is the Star Trek Discovery Transporter experience that was at San Diego Comic Con will also be on the convention floor at New York Comic Con, and they've also indicated that there will be additional exclusive merchandise related to the shows that will be available at New York Comic Con. At San Diego Comic Con, you got the Star Trek Visitors Badge and the Picard family crest, and then there were 2 character pins from Star Trek Lower Decks. Be nice if they did a few more of the character pins from Lower Decks. I know those were pretty popular once folks had heard what the show was about. And as we learn more about that, we'll let you know. But exciting stuff, right, Scott?
Yes. And well, I hope that, there was nothing in this article about it. They only talk about Picard and Discovery, but I'm looking forward to hearing more about the animated shows that are in production.
Yeah, I would love to see more of those shows. We only got the little character stills out of San Diego and Star Trek Las Vegas, but yeah, I mean, eventually, it's premiering in 2020, so 2020 is getting very, very close.
Yeah. And I want one of those transporter room experiences right in my house.
Yes, absolutely.
That thing looks so cool.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I saw videos of people who were in it, and it did look very, very cool. So another event that's taking place this fall, William Shatner will be returning to the Star Trek Tour in Ticonderoga, New York for Treksgiving. Yes, Star Trek Tour, which has had hosted William Shatner 3, maybe 4 times now. He will be back this time around Thanksgiving, November 22nd to the 24th. Shatner will be appearing at the Star Trek Tour, taking pictures, signing autographs, doing events, leading tours around the fabulous sets that they have that recreates the original USS Enterprise from Star Trek, the original series. And also there's an opportunity to purchase a ticket for a Thanksgiving dinner with Mr. Shatner, complete with all the fixings. I went to the Christmas with the Captains, which was the event they did at the end of last year that had William Shatner and also Anson Mount, who they flew literally right from the set of filming the season finale of season 2. He was so tired, you could tell he had been up until 2 a.m. filming. And it was really fabulous. And I think Shatner really, it's clear he enjoys being there a lot. And it seems like the best opportunity that fans have had to kind of get up close and personal with William Shatner that's not in, Star Trek Las Vegas, where there are 6,000 other fans all kind of crowing for his attention. And Scott, I know that you yourself have actually been an invited guest at one of the Star Trek Tour events. I mean, it is a fabulous location, isn't it?
So I've been there twice now, and I found it so moving, so emotional to just feel like you're on that ship. I just can't imagine if I was there and the Shat was sitting right in the center seat. That would just be, I would just be speechless, I think. But yeah, I loved it. I want to go back again sometime. And James Cawley's always improving and adding stuff as much as he can. I know when I was there the first time, he pointed out that they had discovered, I don't know if they found new blueprints or what it was, but the helm and navigation station, he said that they found out that it was like an inch or 2 narrower than it was supposed to be, so they were going to rebuild the whole thing. And he is so dedicated to exactly reproducing those sets, and you can tell the love and energy that's gone into it, because it is amazing to walk around in those sets. And there's so many angles where you don't see anything other than just the set. You're surrounded by it. If you don't look up at the open ceiling, you can feel like you're really walking around on the ship. And as a lifelong fan, it was just I can't recommend it enough to people to go. I mean, it's a bit of a hike to get out there because it's out in a small town, bit of a drive, but worth it. Worth the trip.
Yeah, it is something of a sacred pilgrimage. I've also been twice. I went once for a weekend in which they had the Akutas and Doug Drexler doing tours of the sets, and then I went back up for the Christmas with the Captains event. And yeah, I mean, getting a picture taken with William Shatner while he's sitting in the captain's chair on the bridge of the Enterprise is, that was
wow.
That was an unmissable experience for me.
Yeah.
And they'd also, to the point you were making about James going to such great lengths around the sets, purpose built for that event, because they had Anson Mount, who, was playing Pike. They had built the cage version of the helm navigation console that also doubled as the transporter console in the cage. So the Shatner pictures were taken on the bridge with Shatner in the captain's chair, and then the Anson Mount photos were taken in the transporter room with the cage era transporter console. Nice. Which was just such a nice touch. And even someone like Anson Mount, who he flew from Toronto, in which he was filming literally on the bridge of the Enterprise, the one, the fabulously gorgeous set that they built for the Enterprise bridge up in Toronto, to, the recreation of the 1960s version of the bridge in Ticonderoga, New York. And even he was kind of, blown away by it. I mean, I got to sneak a couple of peeks of him getting a sort of a private tour of the sets from James Corley. And it was clear he was having just an amazing time. Oh yeah, I met him and got to talk with him for a bit at Shore Leave this summer. Mm-hmm. And when I first met him, I was telling him how I'm a lifelong fan, and ever since I was a kid, and how much I appreciate what he's doing with the role, and how much I love seeing this show continue to build and bring in new fans. And he kind of leaned closer to me and said, imagine feeling like that, and then they tell you get to be the captain. Because he's a big Star Trek and sci-fi fan his whole life as well. And so it clearly is a very personal thing for him to be on board the Enterprise and the Discovery. Well, and fingers crossed for the announcement for a Captain Pike show at some point in the future. And we've got more Pike to look forward to, with at least 2 of the short treks coming up. So that's very exciting that we are not yet done with Anson Mount's portrayal as Captain Pike. Yeah. Well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guest give you a theory or a wish about one of the shows, future of the Star Trek franchise, new merchandise, anything that we either think we'll see or we want to see. So Scott, let's hear your theory or wish for this week. I just wish to see the momentum continue. We've got all this stuff going on, these new series in production. I really feel like things are just going to keep going. We're going to keep getting more and more shows. We're going to just see this explosion of Star Trek continue. And I'm so happy to be a part of it in my own tiny way in this time, because, as I mentioned earlier, I was growing up watching Star Trek in the 70s. But there were times in the 70s between the animated series and Star Trek the Motion Picture, there was this wasteland of, there were some books here and there that were coming out from Bantam, but, this was pre-videotape, I lived out in the country. We only had 4 television channels. We didn't have cable. There were times Star Trek wasn't in syndication. And there was just no new Star Trek, no Star Trek to watch. And so now in this new golden age of television, where there's streaming services that are making all sorts of things possible, then to see all this new stuff going on, and to see the new fans that's bringing in, the young people that, maybe TOS being the age it is doesn't quite grab a younger person. But then there are these different shows like Discovery that are very contemporary, that really helps bring these new people in. And that's like what I was talking about with Anson Mount, that to just see this re-energization of the franchise and the characters, that's what keeps me very excited. Well, that is a perfect way of kicking off what I hope will be a busy fall, leading to a packed 2020, leading to an even more packed 2021. Yeah, I mean, I say it at the start of the show each week, and it doesn't get any less true. I mean, we really are in a new golden age of Star Trek. We are riding a wave at the moment of interest and excitement in the franchise, and there being lots of new products coming, lots of new shows coming that we're really very, very excited for. And I'm looking forward to riding this wave for as long as it continues. And some of these franchises that have sort of, been taking really good advantage of the current media environment that we're in, like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Star Wars to some extent. They have been going at this now for, nearly a decade. In the case of the MCU, now going into their second decade. So there's no reason why the Star Trek wave has to end anytime soon. It feels like we are just at the start of hopefully what will be a really kind of vigorous re-energization of the franchise that will push us further into the future and will give us tons of new content and shows to love and shows to maybe not love, but that's fine because there's plenty of Star Trek, and it's not going to be there are things that some people are going to love that other people aren't going to like so much, and that's great because we're now adding, I think we're nearly up to 800 hours worth of television. Let's get our way to 1,000 and give more people more things to love and give new entry points for folks into the franchise. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm surfing the wave right alongside you, Scott. So my theory this week is actually about New York Comic Con. 90 minutes for a panel is a long time to fill. And, sometimes what you get at these conventions is you do get some kind of exclusive footage that folks in the room get to see that then never gets released to the outside world. And San Diego Comic Con, they had 90 minutes, but they were also doing 3 shows because they were doing Discovery and Lower Decks and Picard. Now at New York Comic Con, they're doing just Discovery and Picard. We've talked about the challenges around what can they say around Picard since they want to keep everything close to the vest. So my theory is that 15 minutes of that 90 minutes will be them showing one of the short treks as a convention exclusive, that if you get into the room, you'll get the opportunity to watch one of those. I'm basing that off of nothing other than idle speculation. I have no inside information or anything like that other than thinking about, my goodness, how are they going to film 90 minutes worth of time when they clearly are trying to be very careful about what they reveal about both of these shows, and showing one of the short treks would be a perfect way of doing that. But that would be really exciting for folks who are in that room, which just makes me even more disappointed that I will not be one of them.
People, if they did that, I just can't imagine the crowd would just go completely out of their heads.
Especially if they paired it, they showed one of the Pike ones and they paired it with the announcement of a Pike show. I don't know. That's totally wacky and out there. But hey, 90 minutes is a long time to fill. I mean, they got to be, as I said, they got to be bringing something to it. So, maybe it's something like that. Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, or the future of the franchise that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Scott Pearson, for joining me today. Scott, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
Well, they can find me online. My website is scott-pearson.com. The site for my podcast that I do with my daughter, Generations Geek, is at generationsgeek.com. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter and that sort of thing. It's pretty easy to find me.
And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.